Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Hello and welcome to the School of Love, the place where we learn practical tools based on scientific research towards improving ourselves, living life to its fullest, and contributing to the best of our abilities to the world around us. I am Dr. Grajdian, and I'm a professor of media studies and anthropology at Hiroshima University. In my free time, I am doing my best to guide you in building up a life of contentment, joy, and fulfillment while applying lessons learned in school to overcome the difficulties, challenges, and insecurities of the real world. In today's video, I talk about the situation in which you are dealing with a codependent person and what to do about it. We all know all those persons who live to depend on the others to the extent that they cannot even imagine having a life of their own, and even less than those they depend upon, depending upon them, have a goal in life which extends beneath depending them. So the codependent persons depend literally on other people depending upon them, and keep on doing and have been keeping on doing everything in their power to keep the people they deem dependent on them, depending on them. So this sounds like a very complicated conundrum, but it's actually very simple. So a codependent person lives his or her life by means of making other people depending upon them so that they feel some sort of validation and purpose in life. So they might rationalize this by saying, or more importantly, by thinking that the others need them and cannot live without them, and that they, the codependent person, simply helps the other person or persons survive. But the underlying truth is much, much darker. The situation grows even more concerning as people live increasingly longer lives, which means that young people find themselves often, in fact more often than not, one might think, turning into what I might call codependent supply for their codependent parents, in many cases mothers, but fathers as well. And classical literature has some very interesting examples of codependent parents, mothers as well as fathers. And when one reads those novels or short stories, it becomes obvious that codependent parents are actually abusive parents, not so blatantly obvious abusive parents as for instance, physically abusive parents, but in my opinion, codependent parents are a subcategory of abusive parents. This video starts with the definition of codependency and with the enumeration of key characteristics so that one can identify codependency in oneself and in others. And this video then explains 5 plain steps in learning how to deal with codependent people in a compassionate, sustainable manner. So by the end of the video, you will have a complete protocol for dealing with codependency in others if you choose to do so. So it is a kind of sensitive topic. How can you deal with someone who's essentially trying to make you depending on them so that they have a life? But nevertheless, this is something we have to deal with. And now, first things first. That is 2 important disclaimers. The first disclaimer serves to strongly emphasize the fact that this YouTube channel, the School of Love, is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as motivation and inspiration outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. Together, we can build up a better tomorrow for as many of us as possible. The second disclaimer relates to the fact that I am a trained musician and musicologist, not a psychologist, therapist, or counselor. The ideas I am sharing in my videos reflect my deep-going preoccupation with life, my own life and other people's lives, and express the results of my experience, research, and for better or for worse, my failures and my recovery from those failures. Recovery which is still ongoing. The ideas expressed in the videos on this channel named The School of Love cannot and may not and must not replace the consultation with specialists in whichever areas of your life you might have questions or you might struggle with. if you are new to this channel, at this moment, I would like to ask you to please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, commenting. Thank you very, very much. This helps us not only with that mysterious algorithm, which seems to dominate the YouTube galaxy, but also with contributing to the expansion of the community of humans doing their best to impact positively the world and those around them by discovering their authentic selves and living life wholeheartedly. Thanks again. And now back to today's topic, which is how to deal with a codependent person and what happens when actually we interact with a codependent person, and which are the modalities by which we could not so much disentangle from that interaction, but actually find healthy manners to deal with the person. So what is altogether a codependent person? A codependent person is someone who lives vicariously through the others, and who creates needs and situations of dependence in others, so that in that configuration, their dependence upon the codependent person becomes a sort of life juice for the codependent person. This sounds very much like a people pleaser, but people pleasers are more generally oriented, and people pleasing gestures happen in more general context, while codependent interactions happen usually more in intimate settings like family or romantic relationships. A very one more romantic or highly romanticized such codependent interaction used to be the love relationship, the romantic relationship between Georges Sand and Frédéric Chopin, the romantic pianist and composer. And she would essentially support him into composing as much as he could, and she also created a sense of isolation, social isolation around him. I don't want to say she didn't love him, and she didn't do her best for him to be happy in spite of his illness. He eventually died on tuberculosis, but I'm sure that she also found some sort of satisfaction in being his only source of joy and fulfillment in his life. So this is how very often codependent persons actually isolate those they cling so strongly to, and those in whom they create this needs, which then bind to them. So they isolate them, because once we are isolated, so once someone is isolated, they very much depend for their for their life on the person they are with, on the codependent person. So this is everything sounds kind of evil and malevolent. It is less like this. It's very much that the codependent person doesn't really know how to deal with her or his own life and existential purpose, and then tries to extract it from those around them, and from particularly from those. And the easiest way to be with someone is to make that person dependent upon yourself. This is actually it's almost a survival strategy. So what makes codependent relationships, or codependency in recent years, years rather than decades, is what I would call intergenerational codependency, which happens between generations. So when, for instance, usually parents not allow their children to become full-fledged grown-ups, to mature in a healthy manner, and to turn into self-reliant and responsible members of the society. You will see this phenomenon very often, for instance, in Japan, where parents very strongly and proactively encourage their children to study at the local university, to find a job locally, to marry locally, which in itself is not bad. But the mindset or the motivation beneath is actually which turns this sort of life dynamics into something toxic. Because if you encourage your children to stay where you are, where they have already been, out of your out of your need to have someone who takes care of you when you were old and frail. This is toxic, because in that way you clip their wings. You do not allow them to do whatever they want with their lives. Maybe they really want to stay there and close to their family, but more often than not, you young people do not. Young people want to try and to explore the world, at least to a certain degree, and maybe then to return, but not from the very beginning, particularly in this global era where we have media conveyed access to so many wonderful places and wonderful people. It's after a specific degree of education, tertiary education if you want, young people want to experience new places, new humans outside of their immediate circle, and then maybe they will come back, maybe not. But for us as parents, our fundamental duty is actually to allow and to encourage the children and to plant the seed of wanting and needing to fulfill to attain, to achieve their own potential, and then to expand that potential, and then to contribute to the world around them. So this is why I think codependency becomes a critical issue in today's societies. And how does codependency manifest? How do we recognize a person who is codependent? Well, they would usually come across as extremely altruist. And again, altruism is a very pro-social attitude and mindset. What matters is actually what the difference between codependency and altruism is. The motivation beneath it. They are both two sides of the same coin. Is the motivation beneath it, and the motivation in codependency is I need that validation. I need that life purpose which comes from taking care of others. I'm not doing it for the sake of it. I'm doing it because I received something. And sometimes altruism, this what looks at it as extremely altruism from the outside, actually can turn in really destructive in martyrdom. So becoming a martyr. So how to deal with such people? How to deal with them in a constructive, benevolent manner? So the first step is, as always, becoming aware of it. And becoming aware of such a situation means asking yourself uncomfortable questions. Why am I allowing this person to do so many things for me? What am I doing in return? It should be a mutually beneficial relationship, interaction. And you'll see that you're a very big minus, so to say. And so this sense of awareness that you might be on the receiving end of things which are way too much and you have never reciprocated, that will feel uncomfortable. Nobody really wants to, like, healthy people don't really want to feel like someone who are extracting benefits from someone else without giving something in return. And that's this mutuality is something ingrained in ourselves as social beings, and usually we tend to push down these kind of questions and the answers which come with them or from them. But it is actually in brutal honesty that we find the strength to solve a problem, and then the freedom to move beneath that problem. So awareness is the first step, is the most important. The second step is identify the trigger. So why exactly am I allowing this? So of course there are some benefits, but what's beneath that benefits? Nobody really wants to take advantage of someone else, right? I mean, no really healthy person. So why am I allowing it? What makes me allow things which make me in the end uncomfortable? And together with this, identifying the trigger, what keeps me glued to this person? What keeps me going back to this person again and again, in spite of knowing already that is not really healthy for me? Is important as step number 3 to identify the payoff. What am I getting out of it? Of course, there are disadvantages which stick out, but there is also some sort of validation. You feel important. You feel important that someone is doing so much for you without asking anything in return. And you also feel as if you feel important and you feel validated that this person is doing this only for you. And but precisely if usually this kind of codependent persons are very high functioning. This means they are very well regarded and appreciated in their circle or in the society. So when someone like this, it was the case of Georges Sand and Frédéric Chopin. Frédéric Chopin was so Georges Sand was already well-known socialite and well, she has built up this image of herself as something special within the French society in the first half of the 19th century, while Frédéric Chopin was a Polish pianist, who nobody really knew him, and well, having someone who takes so much care, and afterwards when he collapsed and couldn't needed a lot of care, he felt flattered that someone like Georges Sand, the spectacular and charismatic socialite of the French society in the first half of 19th century, would take care of him so deeply. But actually she was turning into everything was turning into a codependent framework. So what are you receiving? Because you are receiving some benefits, some advantages, and once you have to identify those benefits and advantages, and then start this self-questioning. Why am I accepting it? So what inside of me needs this sort of validation? Once you have identified the trigger and the payoff, the reward, it's important to find healthy way to deal with the trigger and to replace the lacking payoff. So healthy ways of dealing with triggers means establishing in advance before the trigger occurs. So not relying on the fact I can resist the trigger. No, this works only when we are at our best, and usually we are not at our best. So how do you deal with the when the trigger occurs? Usually triggers have a way of hitting when we are not at our best. You establish this in advance. For instance, when let's say you have a bad day and then you just need to talk to someone, and you would grab the telephone and talk to that person, to the codependent person. Instead of doing this, you just say, I go for a walk, and delay talking to the person. And not only delaying talking to the person, because then you'll have the lack of reward which comes from interacting with the codependent person, but also while going for a walk, do it for yourself. It's not necessarily going for a walk. You can also drink a cup of tea, watch a good movie, a nice movie, something which really makes you feel good, sleep, listen to some music, make some movement. So it's something which at the same time is a positive reaction to the trigger and a replacement for the payoff, which usually comes from interacting with the codependent person. This also doesn't mean that you reject the codependent person. It's not about rejecting them. It's not about cutting them off. It's about learning to deal without them, to deal with your life without them, and learning to set up in time boundaries so that you deal with them as functional grown-ups if you're a grown-up, or functional teenagers if you're a teenager, and in terms of, well, relying on each other, because this is what healthy people do. Not good people, we're all good people. Healthy people rely on each other, but they are not dependent on each other. Relying means if I need something, I know I can ask you, and maybe you can help me, maybe not, but I rely on you, and then you should promise you do that for me without an agenda, and I am there for you as well in the same manner without an agenda. This is what relying means. Depending on someone means I need you to solve everything, all this, and if you don't do, I cannot keep on moving. It's a huge difference. Even if it seems only it's semantic, it's more than semantic. It's really about mindset beneath the words. And then as a final step, number 5 is develop gratitude towards this experience. Develop gratitude towards the person who, well, she or he does his or her best to be to fit in the society, in the framework of the society. It's maybe not the healthiest way, but this is all they can. Do not try to change them. Do not try to talk to them. This never works and it backfires very uglily. And be grateful for every step on the way which leads to your healing. This is, again, very important, and it is this will help you stay on track. You will have lapses, you will have setbacks, you will have little failures, hopefully little, particularly at the beginning of the process. But being grateful for who you are, being grateful for having met this person, for what they had given to you. Be grateful for the progress you're doing on your healing journey, for every single step. And this will help you keep you moving forward and stay on track, of course. Well, I hope this helps. I hope I have delivered some, beneficial insights in this video. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to welcoming you very soon again. Love and peace to you all.